as we sort of round out our first ever, I think I can say this, first ever virtual online community day, we are going to try to do something that we've sort of done before and also do something that we've never done before. And then we'll go from there. So tonight, what we're going to do as our evening event is take a moment to honor somebody very, very special to the association, to the field, and to a great many of us. Frank Bialystok, who has contributed so much to our learning and our lives. And we're going to be very proud to be presenting him with the Rosenberg Award, which I believe shipped and arrived safely at his door sometime last week. So he'll have to act surprised. And then after that, we're going to pivot over to a session where we're going to talk about choral singing and choirs in the age of COVID, and we'll talk about all of that. I'll have a number of guests, and I'll introduce them, and then we are going to try to do some singing all together. So, but I didn't give anything away. Okay, so without going into the rest of the program, let me just say very quickly that I am not presenting the award. This is going to be presented by Rebecca Margolis, who is joining us all the way from the wilds of Australia. So hopefully she is here. Hopefully Frank is here. If not, this will be an awkward moment. But before we turn to that, we just wanted to say very, very quickly that we are delighted, the ACJS and myself personally, we're delighted to be able to announce that the 2021 Louis Rosenberg Award is being awarded to our dear colleague and friend, Frank Bialystok, who has done so much, like I mentioned before, as a senior scholar in the field and a friend and an inspiration and a guide for a great many of us. And I won't go into the other details because I'm sure Rebecca wants to say, I'll save that for Rebecca, but I do want to say that at my very first ACJS meeting abroad in New Brunswick, that is outside of the province, I mean by abroad, Frank gave me a ride to one of the sessions, and it was one of the most memorable drives. And he was deeply concerned, was asking about how I was doing as a graduate student and where we were going with all these things. And it was really, really a delight to get to know him from that moment forward. And it's a pleasure to be able to be here to be a part of the process of awarding this award. So without further ado, let me turn to Rebecca, who should be here and who should be, there she is, speaking and awarding. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning to Australians. I am going to keep my remarks brief because I know there's a packed program, but for every word that I say, I would like you to imagine 1,000 or 10,000 other words to honor Frank in this moment. So I just have a few comments that are prepared, and I extend them with a hug and a handshake and whatever else you can imagine to make this feel like a more face-to-face presentation than the virtual one that we are forced to have during COVID. It is my distinct honor to be able to present this year's Louis Rosenberg Canadian Jewish Studies Service Award to Dr. Franklin Bialystok, and here is the virtual award that I am presenting that he already has. This is the third time that I've had the tremendous opportunity to present this award, each time to a senior scholar in the field who has been a model and mentor to me. So before Frank, Seymour Main and Richard Menkes. And it is my great honor to be able to do this for the third time and to be able to express my appreciation to those senior scholars in the field who have not only laid the groundwork for our own scholarship and taught us, but also acted as mentors voluntarily, informally, and put tremendous time into the building of this organization and other foundational groundworks for our field. And it's really a tribute to them that we're here today at this conference as scholars, as students in the field of Canadian Jewish Studies. So for those of you who don't know Frank, he's a very distinguished scholar whose work has been a game changer in our understanding of the impact of the Holocaust on Canadian Jewish life. And this comes from his own family background, but is also grounded in a very, very strong tradition of scholarship and unearthing the historical artifacts and documents to be able to tell new narratives of the Canadian Jewish experience. So he is a product of this outcoming of the 1980s, where scholars entered the field of Canadian Jewish studies in a professional capacity to be able to tell those difficult stories. His book, Delayed Impact, The Holocaust and the Canadian Jewish Community, which argues that knowledge of the Holocaust did not become widespread in Canada until the 1970s and beyond, stands as a seminal work in the field of Canadian Jewish studies and Holocaust studies, alongside None is Too Many. And I know when None is Too Many, which is considered sort of the groundbreaking work in the field, is cited, Frank's work is cited alongside as offering a second expanding narrative on the story of the Holocaust and Canadian Jewish life. Frank's most recent forthcoming book, An Institutional History of Jewish Canada, offers a tremendous contribution to our understanding of the Canadian Jewish experience right into the present. And for those of you who are anxiously awaiting this book, I can tell you that it has sections on contemporary Jewish music, contemporary Jewish literature right into the present. Frank is a historian who remains invested in Jewish life as it unfolds right into the present day. Frank's research is meticulous, his content always pertinent, his writing lively and engaging. And for those of you who have read his articles or his books, you know exactly what I am referring to. Not every historian can tell a story in a way that is really lively and engaging in a book that you literally will want to read on the bus on your way to and from work, which is how I have come across his works. His scholarship forms part of the core list of any Canadian Jewish studies bibliography. His commitment to the field has been enduring, and its significance cannot be overstated. During these restrictive COVID times, I think it is especially important to recognize those people who have gone out of their way to help inspire and support emerging thinkers and scholars. Frank has shaped the educational experiences of countless youth and emerging academics, first as a high school teacher and subsequently as a part-time professor of the University of Toronto's Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies and at the University of Waterloo. As a scholar of Canadian Jewish studies and Holocaust studies, he has informally mentored a generation of scholars in the field, probably 2 generations of scholars in the field, actually, at this point. I cannot list the number of times his former students or emerging scholars have cited him to me as important influences in their intellectual development. I proudly count myself as one of them. Above all, though, I would like to acknowledge Frank's generosity as a mensch in the field. In my experience within ACJC, he has never said no to a request for input, expertise, and support. As academics increasingly saddled with bureaucracies and being bombarded with new apps and administrative procedures, Frank stands out as a model for what we can all strive to be in the field today, remembering to not only be excellent scholars and teachers, but to care for one another and to nurture the next generation. Frank, it is my greatest privilege to present you with this award. And now we can, virtually applaud. I don't know how awards happen in this way.
Rebecca, wow. Thank you. Oh, this is amazing. I was not expecting the award. I still am gobsmacked that you chose me. And I certainly wasn't expecting you. And I'm great. Oh, I'm so happy. And thank you very much for all these kind words. Okay. I was completely unprepared for Hernan's email that I was chosen as this year's recipient of the Louis Rosenberg Award, adding my name to the list of illustrious scholars, community builders, poets, writers, teachers, judges, and public figures who preceded me, men and women that determined that there was a story worthy of telling about a band of Jewish fur trappers and merchants from the 13 colonies, whose descendants would be found from coast to coast a century later, and whose history was first documented in 1926. Well, I'm now sitting in my country hideaway. In my cluttered home office, I sit within arm's reach of Louis Rosenberg's volume based on the 1931 census edited by Mort Weinfeld, without which I would be bereft. As a total stats freak, Rosenberg is my hero. He tells me how many murderers were Jewish, that the Jewish population of Kamsack, Saskatchewan, was 10% of the city, was 10% of the town, the highest ratio in the country at that time, and the number of Jewish tailors in Montreal, among a lot of other minutiae. I sat with Rosenberg on my side. Sorry, I'm just choked up here. I was sat with Rosenberg at my side, and he was his work was a base for how I started working on this current research, writing a history of the Jews of Poland, a history of the Jews of Canada. I want to give you a little bit of my background. I'm an only child, born in Poland, in Łódź, in English, to Sam and Rena, who were sole survivors from large families. They were married just before the war broke out in Warsaw. They escaped to Russia. My mother was fluent in Russian, and when they were sent to Soviet labor camps and then to Uzbekistan, she was able to completely manage all of the bureaucracy and dictates and what have you that the Soviet authorities were placing upon Poles who were in Russia. We returned to Poland we returned to Poland in 1946, and I was born about 10 days after our return in Łódź. We managed to get out of Poland in 1948 on forged papers. My father was an incredibly street smart guy who could pull all sorts of magic. I was 2 years old, and there's a lot of stuff between then and when we settled in Toronto. We settled in Toronto, and I want to tell you the long story. Due to the efforts of the Landsmannschaft from my father's community in Silesia, the Zagłębie Society, and members of the Zagłębie Society allowed us to, sponsored us, if you will, to come to Toronto. One of them was, okay. So at home, we spoke Polish. And when I was 3, I was sent to a Yiddish-speaking nursery. English was not a problem. My mother had learned English in Poland and worked in an office in English in the 1930s. And my father learned English very quickly on the job. Their friends were survivors. The get-togethers were boisterous, a jumble of languages, full of living rooms devoid of anyone over 40. As an only child, I retreated into memorizing atlases and pictorial history books. I haven't stopped doing that. I received my BA at Waterloo, and a few years later, my B.Ed at the University of Toronto. I wanted to be a high school teacher, and I was hired by the Toronto Board of Education, where I taught history from 1971 to 1987. At the urging of my students, I was drawn into teaching the Holocaust when the miniseries was shown in 19 1978. Over the next 20 years, I was fortunate to work with teachers, survivors, and scholars, including Irving Abel and Harold Troper. Working on the pedagogy of the Holocaust, I worked with a lot of other teachers from the Toronto board on that in the 1970s. We were working with survivors. We put on a lot of programs. In 1987, I was diagnosed with hepatitis C, for which there was no cure. I was told that in 10 years, if lucky, I would receive a transplant. In need of a distraction, Irving, Hesh, and Michael Maris supported my decision to do a PhD at York with Irving. Irv brought me into the Toronto Jewish Historical Society, where I met Miriam Waddington, another recipient of this award. After receiving my doctorate, I taught at York, Waterloo, and since 2000 at U of T. Initially on the Holocaust and about Polish Jewry, and since 2005 on Canadian Jewry at the Centers for Canadian and Jewish Studies at U of T. My dissertation, Delayed Impact, was written as I was waiting for a liver transplant, which occurred in 1998. It was published by McGill Queen's University Press. They knew of my condition. They knew that I may not be there for the publication, but they supported me throughout. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. More recently, I was approached by University of Toronto Press, as Rebecca has indicated, to write a general history of Canadian Jews for undergraduates and for the lay reader. It is scheduled for release next February. It's titled Faces in the Crowd, the Jews of Canada, and is dedicated to the memory of Jerry Tolchinsky, the foremost scholar of the history of Canadian Jews. Jerry was my friend and my mentor, supporter for through all of the tribulations that I was going through. I'm honored to be added to the list of recipients of the Rosenberg Service Award. I'm encouraged by the range of research the latest generation of scholars, some of whom are with us, and I look forward to their presentations and publications. Thank you.
Frank, we're all so deeply honored and moved to have been a part of this. Rebecca's words, your words are far more eloquent than anything that I could ever put together, but it means a great, great deal to me. And your support and encouragement to all of us in small ways, large ways, has meant so much to the field. And we are also on the verge of tears as a consequence. So I just want to say again, from the bottom of my heart, congratulations. And it is one of the deepest honors of my life to be able to award this to you on behalf of the ACJS. Thank you.
Thank you, Hernan. Oh, I'm muted. I'm not, okay. Thank you, Hernan. Rebecca, wow, all the way from down there. Hernan, I remember that first talk that, in the car, and I drew from from my colleagues, and what I drew from you, Hernan, is your interest in classical music and the classical music that was written in Canada, especially from scholars at the University of Toronto Music School. And, I brought that into my teaching. I brought a lot of music into my teaching. Janice, we all of you so much. And even now, as we're working through the, finishing touches of the book, what you're helping us in terms of photographs and everything else, is just amazing. Randy and I, we worked together, of course, on the Center for Jewish Studies, and Richard, Wanda, a lot of people I see here. I'm really appreciative of working with you, of reading your work, and we will continue. Right? Thank you.
And I think now, if anybody would like to add their, mazel tovs and share, whatever they would like, I think it would be most appropriate. I'll just say one more thing, Frank. All day we had our music in the waiting room was Glick, Srul Irving Glick, and it was in your honor as well. So I know you're a great appreciator of his music, and so am I. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I just wanted to say that his suite Hebraïque was performed by one of the great outstanding musicians in Canada, Jacques Israelievich. He was the concertmaster of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. And Jacques recorded it, and Jacques and his family were very close friends of ours. Jacques tragically died a few years ago of cancer. So it really means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm basically Theodora, who's in charge of all the tech, is unmuting everybody if you feel like saying Mazel Tov in a boisterous round of Mazel Tovs for a person most deserving. Please take a moment to do so. Thank you. Mazel Tov, Frank.
Mazel
Tov.
Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov.
Sheinem Dank.
And there's
great picture.
Dziękuję bardzo. Okay, I'm going to go through all this.
Thank you, Frank, once again.
Thea, thanks for working with us on this. It's great that you're in the background.
Thank you.
Well,
Frank, you've been muted, my friend. Sorry.
Okay, now I'm mute. Am I all right now?
You're good. Yep.
No, you're not. Oh, I'm good. Okay, yeah. As Jerry would have said, finishes works with Eufen Weg on the road. We're on the road. I'm going to stay on the road.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Frank.